Okay, so our next speaker is Rhiannon Evans from Cardiff University. And she's going to be speaking about her project looking at experiences of online mental health and wellbeing support during the COVID-19 pandemic, based on a qualitative study with care experienced young people, carers and social care professionals. So Rhiannon, over to you if you want to share your screen.
Can you
just sorry. Let me make you a co-host. Yeah, there you go, she can share now.
Just give me a minute to pull it up.
Okay, that's your slide showing now.
Right. Okay, thanks everyone. So thanks for being here today. And as with the presentation, thank you to Triumph for funding this, and also thanks to Emily and Donna, who are also here from the team today. So I'm just going to briefly take you through the study, some of our key findings and some of our next plans. So our focus of the study was thinking about developing and adapting mental health interventions for care experienced children and young people. So care experienced young people were part of the high risk group theme, which constituted the Triumph network. So just to give you a little bit of background about Triumph, Savas has kindly introduced it, and as I said, there were three key themes, one of them being the key groups. So we received funding as part of this theme and one of four CCON studies. So as I just said, so our focus was a collaboration with the Fostering Network in Wales, Cardiff University and the University of Glasgow to look at how can we best develop and adapt online mental health interventions for children and people with experience of care. So just to give a little bit of background and context to our study, so we know through a long history of research that children and people who have been in care, either currently in care or with previous experience of care, tend to have poorer mental health and well-being than the general population. And the COVID pandemic provided a new and challenging context for service delivery. So we know that there were issues around isolation, digital exclusion, which is reported as a problem in this population group, financial precarity, particularly amongst care leavers, lack of access to support services, as happened in a wider issue really. And within this, particularly the Fostering Network in Wales, reported a rapid transition of services online or into blended provision. And this rapidity of it made it quite challenging to know what was the best approach. And if things were moving online, how would this be sustained effectively and acceptably longer term? So just to outline our study aims, so what we wanted to try and do is understand what's important to young people, foster and kinship carers and practitioners in terms of the mental health and wellbeing services for experienced children and young people, and explore the relative sort of advantages, disadvantages and experiences of in-person, remote and blended provision. And particularly the last question then we were thinking about is what improvements can be made to the format, function, delivery, acceptability and accessibility of these services moving forward. So our research methods centred on an interview-based approach, and due to the pandemic, we conducted online virtual interviews via Zoom or Microsoft Teams. So we did experience challenges in recruitment. This was a widely reported issue amongst the care experienced population during this time, and quite understandably. So in the end, we had 4 young people who had experience of care, although one of those was a young person who lived with foster carers who were their biological family. Then we had 10 foster and kinship carers and 9 health and social care professionals who were all in the Welsh context. We also ran a series of advisory consultation groups in order to refine the research findings and to reflect on them and think about recommendations. So these were facilitated by the Fostering Network in Wales, Foster Care Advisory Group, the Young People's Care Forum Group, and Cascade Voices, which is a group of care experienced young people who advise on research at Cardiff University. So I'm just going to try and centre more on the findings that we had from the study. So just our initial mapping was thinking about, well, what online services do young people and carers use during the COVID-19 pandemic? So people did report a shift in what they used, an increased use in online and virtual provision. So this include online forums, CAMs, counselling, peer support groups, a number of apps such as mindfulness apps to support their well-being, telephone interactions with their GP. We know that schooling moved online, so it was accessing provision through school portals, and then lots of other online activities which weren't directly targeted to mental health, but were seen as supportive of well-being, such as scouts or other organisational activities. To note, most carers said they hadn't used formal services, but did rely heavily on informal relationships with other carers and social work teams in order to support mental health and well-being. So I'm going to briefly take you through the 5 key findings that we had from the study, which are the basis of recommendations moving forward. So the first is thinking about awareness and access. So generally across the board, there was a lack of awareness about what services are available to young people, particularly within the pandemic. And young people really want provisions that are easily and instantly accessible, particularly in regard to having someone to talk to. So ideally, they'd like someone 24 hours a day that they could reach out to if they needed to. And then the third point within this is really thinking that services need to be available at a time that suits young people and their carers. So I just said about that 24-hour access, because it can be difficult to find appropriate times to access services. So there's just a couple of quotes on each of these slides that you might want to look to as we go through, but I won't read them out due to time. So the second theme that we came was flexibility. So this is probably our central recommendation, and the need not to treat care experienced children and people as a homogenous group, that they all have different needs depending on their identity, but also where they are on the care journey. So there is a need for young person-centred approaches that are tailored to individual needs. And we saw diverse experiences of online provision, which were both positive and negative and might be harnessed moving forward. So some felt it was easier to disengage online because it could be tiring and boring. Technical difficulties were frustrating for all involved. But some people thought it offered more autonomy. They could engage if they felt uncomfortable, giving more ownership. And then they could also attend services at a level that they felt was comfortable for them. So they might attend, but not necessarily switch on their camera. But to note that some young people felt the higher level services, as they might have called them, such as CAMs, where we move into more treatment-based approaches, would be better in person. A big theme that came up from carers and professionals was the idea of safety, protection, and risk. So there were some concerns, or at least discussion, about how do we keep young people safe online when delivering mental health and wellbeing provision. And they had different views on risk assessments and safeguarding remotely. So for carers, there were some concerns that they were unable to respond to inklings when certain services were not in person. They might have some emergent concerns that something was wrong, but then didn't really know how to take it forward or respond in kind of informal conversations. There were difficulties in contacting social workers, and just uncertainty about using technology and internet safety for their child. For professionals, there was a slightly different set of concerns about lack of guidance about how to do risk assessments online, as they'd really been adapted to online formats, concerns about internet cutting out, causing safeguarding issues, and if a young person chose to have their camera off, they couldn't really be sensitive to some of the non-verbal cues really that the young person might be in distress. And then we had the training, and this is quite obvious and kind of gives good guidance really for where we might go next in terms of supporting carers, professionals and children and young people. So there's a real need to improve signposting of services, and there was discussion about a central hub listing all available services for children and young people who might have experience of care. Carers in particular sort of explored the need to have additional training about a range of issues or activities. So really thinking about having conversation with children about their mental health and their needs, how to support young people in building relationships online and online safety. That's a really key one. Some more pragmatic support about how to use technology. And also what we saw was a consistent neglect of carers' own mental health, lack of service and provision to support that. So a need for that moving forward. Professionals also cited the need for training on digital skills, including relationship building with young people online. And then finally, we have resource, which I think underpins a lot of issues across the board in terms of mental health and wellbeing, specific to this group of young people. So as I said at the start, there is extensive evidence about digital poverty and digital divide, and young people in care are particularly subject to a lack of availability and investment in technology. So it's making sure that they can have technology available to access what is out there. And even where technology is currently available to them, for example, provided through the school, there'll often be prohibited access restrictions so that they can't use other types of resources. And this sits within a context of poor investment in mental health and wellbeing for care experiencing young people. A particular issue that we see again and again is a lack of support for care leavers who are unsupported as they transition from child and adolescent services into adult services. But we do see this time and this transition as an opportunity to develop new resources. So just to pull that together and our recommendations that we have moving from the study and where we kind of want to go next and taking this forward. So we had the awareness and access. So really thinking about how do we best make services clearly advertised and accessible to children and young people. How do we ensure choice and flexibility where everyone can have some right and scope to choose what meets their need? And part of that thinking about is service in person, online, or blended provision. Safety and protection and risk. So how do we support young people and their carers and professionals in taking safe risks online and ensuring safeguarding is always happening? Then training, so thinking about how we might better train carers, but also professionals from here in supporting this process. And then resources, so ensuring funding for technology to ensure that equity is being achieved, and then the wider issue of needing more resources for mental health and wellbeing provision generally. So just to, in the last couple of minutes, pick up on our next steps. So this slide, my colleague Lorna is here and is going to talk in the session later today, so please do ask her more about this if you're interested. But Lorna, with our colleague Rachel Vaughan, has secured funding from Cardiff University from the Innovation for All funding to really address this issue about access and awareness and trying to bring more knowledge really about what resources are out there for care experienced children and young people. So they will be looking at identifying a range of resources and testing these resources with young people who have experience of care and get feedback on that, and then co-develop an online resource hub which can be helpful both to policymakers, practitioners, but also to researchers, and that's something that we could follow up with some of you if that's of interest for you. So just made a note that if you could put in the chat as we go, or if you have any suggestions, that would be really helpful to the team. And then we were just thinking about and just wanted to flag the Thrive magazine with you, which has come out this week. So this is a magazine which we had a special issue of on mental health and wellbeing. So it's led by the Fostering Network and is made available to all children and young people in foster care in Wales, but is circulated beyond this. And this is just a short magazine exploring key issues around mental health, but also identifying some useful resources initially that might be helpful to people. So please do follow up on that link and take a look. It's available in English and in Welsh. So that brings us to the end of the presentation, sorry. So thank you so much, and please let me know if you have any questions. Thanks to Alice for putting the links in the chat.
Okay. Thanks, Rhiannon. That was a great presentation. We've got one question come through already. So someone's asked, could you tell me more about how you decide the scope of the online services the young people and carers use during COVID?
Yeah, sure. So that is a really interesting question. So we actually didn't predefine what services were included at the start. We wanted to keep it open and think about what was meaningful and important to young people and their carers. And so I did say on one of the initial slides, actually, while young people who might have diagnosable mental health conditions did use CAMs or GPs or other sort of more traditional mental health services during the pandemic, lots of young people and carers relied on interventions and support services which wouldn't necessarily be classified as mental health, could be educational or just social activities. So we really wanted to kind of see, is there a wider range of approaches that might be helpful and supportive to young people that we could consider kind of sharing and taking forward in future.
Okay, thanks, Rhiannon. I think we'll leave it there just in the interest of time and trying to keep schedule. So thank you again, Rhiannon, for a wonderful presentation. And if anyone else has any other questions,
please do follow up with me as well if there's anything you wanted to talk to more. Okay, take care. Bye.
Thanks a lot. Okay, so